Hi, Jack Byrom here. I wanted to give a step-by-step critique of a specific entry on Wikipedia and maybe just put it in context and talk about the overall problem with Wikipedia in the age of information wars, in the age of the internet, in the age when anybody can say anything about anything at any time with no accountability. And I think a lot of people have the mistaken notion that Wikipedia is actually reliable. And I want to put some question into that. I know that there are individual articles, and I've seen them, you've seen them, that appear balanced, that appear reasonably well written, that appear rational. But if you use it very often, you will occasionally run into articles that are just completely full of bias, or they're very poorly written, they're incomplete, they're what they call stubs, somebody just runs out of steam in mid-sentence, or they go off on some weird tangent and forget the rest of the point that they should have been focusing on. And anyway, I believe I've run into one of these articles, and it's something I know a little about. And the article is about the prominent physician and nutritional researcher John A. McDougall, Dr. McDougall. And anyway, I was working on an unrelated project recently, nothing to do with Wikipedia. I don't usually even look at Wikipedia. But I had cited Dr. John McDougall's work in a rather extensive presentation that I had composed regarding whole food plant-based nutrition. And I had cited Dr. McDougall. He's one of the world experts on it and has vast clinical experience treating people with diet. So my friend looked up Dr. McDougall on Wikipedia apparently, and it was really not favorable. It made him look like a fad doctor, a lightweight, almost a quack, highly questionable, not qualified to really be a heavyweight authority on a medical matter. And so I went and looked at Wikipedia, and I was like aghast. And I'm like, is this even the same guy? The brilliant research, the walking encyclopedia of medical procedures, of scientific study, of medical research. He's a force of nature in medicine. And anyway, the page here was terrible, and it was totally biased against him. It was incomplete. It was outdated. And I just kind of started looking around the page and the history of it, and it's the same old problem with Wikipedia. Nobody's really in charge. There's no real accountability. There's a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of rules, and people get lost in the weeds, and they forget what an encyclopedia is really about. It's not about you. It's about presenting a whole picture of the subject, the whole picture, and letting the reader decide. And that's supposed to be Wikipedia's policy. But that's not what's going on here. So anyway, I wanted to dive into this a little. And my background is I have a degree in environmental science. I'm trained as a high school science teacher. I have experience teaching high school physics, chemistry, environmental science, and even a little bit of math. And I also have 10 years professional experience editing high quality peer-reviewed journals such as the physical review letters of the American Physical Society. So I know something about peer review. I know something about valid citations. I know what science is. I've taught science. And I'm a professional editor, technical editor, but this is technical and this is editing. And I think people need to be aware of what can happen with Wikipedia. Well, right now, the logical progression of this analysis is to actually go to a screenshot with, dynamic movement, and for me to actually highlight and narrate on the page issues. You can see I've got it still up on the screen, but I'm having some technical limitations with my Microsoft software. So I may have to just do a short video introduction to the problems here, and then I'm going to make an explicit link below the video on YouTube, and the link will have a separate video that will just be exclusive screen, like a live scroll of the screen with me highlighting, and we can go a lot more into detail. But anyway, this is the page. This paragraph, the lead paragraph, is very important in an encyclopedia entry. And I think this is just really poorly done here, or somewhat poorly done. They're focusing on his supposed ownership of a food company, Dr. McDougall's Right Foods, which I'm not even sure he still owns anymore. He very well may have sold that off. So I don't know if that should be in the lead paragraph. And then he's written a number of diet books, the entry says. Well, I think there are a lot more than just diet books. He's really a medical doctor that focuses on treating a wide variety of serious illnesses, including cancer, osteoporosis, and coronary heart disease, with the best practices that he can devise. That this is his own words, and it happens to be diet, but I don't think he's really focused on so much on helping people lose weight like some fad diet doctor, but that's what it sounds like here. He's more interested in just being a regular old doctor. That's my impression of him, and at least he should be able to present that in a more neutral fashion. I believe this is somewhat biased, in my opinion. And we have outdated references as well, citing his ownership of a food company. Well, here scrolling down a bit more on the page, which by the way is the February 16th, 2022 version of it, in the evening in Mountain Standard Time. You can see that it's incomplete. The early years education and career. Well, this person is a very public person. He's given a lot of lectures, a lot of books, and we've got 1, 2, 3 sentences, his whole career in 3 sentences. It doesn't say a word about how he came to be a doctor, how he got interested in diet and nutrition in the practice of medicine, how his career started out on a sugar plantation in Hawaii in the 1970s, and then how he went back to medical school after that and became a board certified internist, and then moved back to the mainland. It doesn't say anything about that. Um, and I don't think the writers are really that interested, or the editors have not allowed that to be fleshed out with a couple more sentences, especially about his sugar plantation experience where he saw multiple generations of immigrant workers and found really interesting comparative differences between generations on this plantation. Anyway, that's not in there. Interesting over on the right side in the sidebar is that he's known for his advocacy of the McDougall plan, a fad diet, which includes low-fat, starchy foods. So Wikipedia is telling you that this is a fad diet. Is it a fad diet? Who said it's a fad diet? Dr. McDougall doesn't think it's a fad diet. He states that it's the diet of the human primate. It's the diet that this animal should be eating and has, in fact, been eating for thousands of years. He doesn't say it's a fad at all. He says he and many other doctors, such as, Neil Bernard or Dr. Furman, Caldwell Esselstyn, whatever, Chico and Campbell is a name I'm really thinking of, that found that in many societies around the world, such as China, that they basically lived on this diet until recently. In Africa, in North Africa, they've lived on this diet for centuries. So I don't know how it's a fad diet now. When you compare this sidebar to Dr. Atkins' entry on Wikipedia, you'll see nothing about it being a fad diet here. So that's grossly unfair. It's unprofessional. Okay, so now we scroll down a bit more and we're in the paragraph, the section that's about his diet programs, they call it. And I've got highlighted there in this preview video here. This is not the detailed analysis. You'll need to go to the other video for this. But I've got this, in the third paragraph you see there, I've got highlighted that he opposes conventional cancer treatment. And they've got a citation there. And the citation is to a 30-year-old book that's by a person named Butler. And this is if you look at the discussion among Wikipedia editors about this author and about this citation, which is, you can see it cited over and over in this article, reference 3. There it is, it's down there at the bottom in the reception paragraph. It's over and over. The article is built around citing this Butler nutrition or, fad diet commentary book. Anyway, the person that wrote it has been described by Dr. McDougall as a beach bum when he wrote the book. But anyway, it's a regular published book, but it's 30 years old. And the guy at one point in time was head of an anti-quack doctor society. So I think that tells you something, that he appears to have some idea or suspicion that Dr. McDougall is a quack doctor, which I think is that's inappropriate for this kind of article, for this kind of physician with medical licenses in several states and a real practice and a serious reputation. Anyway, I'll just point out that this has been argued about many, many times on these pages, on the talk page on the Wikipedia entry, and it's by no means approved by all the editors. The reception, that section starting at the bottom there, that's just the first part of it, is extremely biased. And there are 4 paragraphs in it, and there is no viewpoint that's positive for the work of this clinician and researcher. It's completely against him. He doesn't really get to, nobody that believes in his work, and there are many people there, many well-known people, they're not allowed to present their voice, so there's no balance whatsoever in that section. So it's a hatchet job. And I'll go more into detail in that in the other video that accompanies this one. Okay, here we'll just take a quick look at the reference list, which is mostly anti-subject references. Look at reference number 3. This one is highly controversial. I think it's a poor reference to use for this type of encyclopedia entry of a living person. It's 30 years old for Kurt Butler. Close look at homeopathy, acupuncture, faith healing, and other unconventional treatments. And he basically apparently has had Dr. McDougall under suspicion of being a quack at that time, and the review in this book was not complimentary by any means. Look at reference number 5. That's a dead link from Bloomberg about Dr. McDougall's so-called head of Dr. McDougall's Right Foods, which I don't think he is anymore, or he sold off the company, he's no longer on the board. I don't know. I wrote a query about this on the editor's page on Wikipedia, and nobody was interested in looking into it or answering me, or not yet. Interesting, reference 7. There's a related group that's along the same vein of practice as Dr. McDougall's practice, and that's called the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, headed by Neil Bernard, MD. And Dr. McDougall's worked with them as a member, I'm sure. And apparently they're spying on PCRM and Neil Bernard. And they have a whole file about these evil animal lovers. You know, they have a file on PETA, and they have a file on these doctors that don't think animals should be killed for their meat or raped for their milk. And anyway, I pointed out the reference 7, it's actually supposed to be activist. I wrote that explicitly on the talk page for this entry, mentioned that it was misspelled many days ago, and nobody cares. Nobody cares. It's still misspelled. Activist. It's clearly activist, and the link is good. Anyway, this is kind of a cut rate Class C reference list. If they want to get this up to be a higher quality entry, they need to get some higher quality references and update them and get rid of the misspelled word. Yeah. And Dr. McDougall clearly built his work on the work of many others, such as Roy Kemner at Duke University, who treated severely ill people with what was called the rice diet, and the work of Nathan Pritikin in the 70s, a brilliant researcher that many doctors worked with to improve their practice and basic research. And, you know, many other, he's just built on the huge amount of work going back 100 years on nutritional research, on what basic amino acids were necessary and what amount for human life. That's going back something like 80, 100 years. And then, we move forward with the work of Roy Swank at Oregon Health Sciences Center, into the role of diet in diseases such as coronary artery disease and multiple sclerosis. Many published references in journals such as the Journal of the American Medical Association and the Lancet. And anyway, up here is a typical list of references that doctors along the line of Dr. McDougall would use to cite the dangers of dairy and why they advise their patients not to partake of dairy. And the Wikipedia editors in this article said, well, they say that apparently I can't even talk about Dr. McDougall's work because nobody allegedly has published a secondary review of his work in like a diet and nutrition review. So high quality primary sources such as these are not allowed in these pathetic journals such as this asthma immunology journal, reference number 3 there, or the International Journal of Molecular Science, reference 2, or Cell. Nobody's ever heard of that journal. Those are not allowed to back up any claims that Dr. McDougall may have had, and I don't even know if that's the whole point. It's an encyclopedia article, folks. It's not a medical treatise. So these editors of the Wikipedia are citing Wikipedia policy that we can't use primary sources like this. So basically, their entry has got nothing in it about Dr. McDougall, or it's all bad, because they say that, well, there are secondary sources that say all the bad things about his practice. So anyway, his work is built on research. The man is a walking research citer. He can cite hundreds of articles in his head, and he clearly, from the beginning, built his entire career by reading peer-reviewed journals and by working with other doctors and researchers. So these editors are just totally out of control here. I don't know if they're just not seeing the forest for the trees, or if they have a problem with a doctor on the cutting edge. Maybe both. So anyway, I don't have the ability to go into detail here. I'm sorry, but the other video has very much more detail on these actual entries in Wikipedia, and I compare them a little, the McDougall one to Dr. Atkins' entry. Just do a little bit of comparative analysis. So I highly recommend that the viewer go to the link below in YouTube and click on that other video that goes with this one. Thank you. Oh, I'm live. Okay. All right. Well, this is just going to be a short wrap up of this is just a preview, a video, and I apologize I was unable to put the video in the actual line by line critique, but I wanted to be accountable so you can see me. I'm Jack Byrom. I'm an editor. I'm a science editor, and I have a degree in environmental science, and I care about science and the truth on the internet. And Wikipedia has really done a bungle here on a living person, an accomplished researcher and medical doctor, and they're not going to do anything about it. So we need to go outside of the platform, and that's what I'm doing here to make people aware that some of the articles are poorly written and biased on that platform. Wikipedia editors on this page say they're doing everything by policy. They say they have a medical article policy on not using primary resources to back up claims by the subject of their entry, and I think that's yeah, that is true, I'm sure, but I don't know if they're misapplying it or just using it as an excuse to do a hack job on somebody whose work they don't really respect. It may be both. Nobody's really in charge of this entry. Nobody's accountable. So it's pretty hopeless to try to fix the problems. It'll just get overturned. And there's been many people have tried to fix it. Dr. McDougall has complained about it even recently, and nobody's going to fix it. So I just thought I would say that this is bad writing. This is false information on a highly visible platform, and Wikipedia should be held accountable. I'm not going to give any more donations to them, and I'm going to be a little more suspicious of what I see on the entry. And I have been a user of Wikipedia for over the years, and it is an interesting free resource. But you really have to be careful with this in this day and age. And Wikipedia needs to get with the program, or we need to just move on to a different platform that doesn't spread false and misleading information. So go to my other video, and I'll go a lot more into detail. And thanks for watching. Let's all do our best to stand up for truth and science and the public interest. Thank you.